Designer, nice mangoes, what you gonna do?
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Aftershow. A brand spanking new series. Patreon exclusive. Brought to you by Polite Conversations. This is where I'm hoping to get to know you a little better, dear patrons. This will be the place to come hang out for a casual chat. Let's talk about all things woking up and polite conversations and Twitter spaces and whatever else you'd like to discuss. More content, more conversations, more fun, and even more rationality. Welcome to episode 2 of the Polite Conversations Aftershow, everyone. If you are listening to this, you are probably a patron, and if you are not, you should become one. Today I have with me 2 wonderful patrons. I've got Erin and Kate, and I thought we could talk about sort of what it's like to be a woman even in the IDW-critical spaces, because there are so few of us. There are very few in the IDW, and then there are also very few in the IDW watching, IDW critiquing spaces. And so a lot of the critique I find tends to miss some stuff because it comes from a very cis white dude perspective usually. And so that's what I thought we could talk about. But first, let's introduce you guys. I've got one new-ish patron and one older patron. Kate, how are you? I think you've been a patron from my very, very early days.
Yes, I think I've been a patron. Oh, it's definitely been years, but I can't remember exactly when. It was probably around 2016 or 17, maybe 2016, I think. Yeah,
wow, it's so cool to be connecting with someone like that for so long. So I really appreciate that. And you have a very interesting background. Why don't you tell me more about that?
Oh, okay. I kind of got into your work because I was doing my undergrad, and I was majoring in Islamic studies and Islamic history. And your podcast was recommended to me by my brother, who was a listener.
Oh.
And I absolutely loved it. And I had actually already started listening to Sam Harris and some of those people. So I'm glad that he recommended you because I don't know where I'd be now if he didn't. Hopefully the same place, but you never know.
So back then I was probably still a Sam Harris fan, sort of, or
Yes, yeah, you were. Yeah, you definitely were.
Sorry about that. I apologize.
It would be a bit rich for me to be critical of that because a bit hypocritical. But so I was studying Islamic studies, and it's interesting thinking back now because I continued with that, and then I did my honours in Islamic studies, and I kind of got more into feminism and began combining the two, and continued on to do a PhD in Islamic studies and specifically in Islamic feminism, which I finished.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a big turnaround really in my way of thinking. And so I finished that last year, and I now work as a researcher for 2 different organisations. I won't name them, but one is a family violence organisation, and the other one is a organisation that focuses on Muslim women's equality in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really interesting to kind of think about the 180 that I did, going from a Sam Harris fan to where I am now. It's strange to look back.
Oh, I know about that, yeah. Yeah, well, I've been on a similar journey, but I mean, I am no Islamic studies PhD, so that's really interesting. What made you want to study that subject?
Everyone always asks me this, and I don't really know, other than it was a bit of an accident. I had one leftover subject in my first year of my undergrad, and my partner just said to me, like, "Oh, why don't you do this Islamic studies subject? You know, I went on exchange to Jordan in high school, so
Wow.
yes, so it's like, you know, you're interested in this, just do that." And I went to the class, and it was within the first 5 minutes. So I was like, okay, this is definitely my major. It was, I just instantly fell in love with it.
That's fascinating. I mean, I personally cannot imagine majoring in Islamic studies.
Well, it was with a sorry, I'll let Erin give her intro in a second. But it wasn't theology. So it was with it was, I would say there was a balance between teachers who were critical and looking at it in a more critical way, and teachers who were Muslim themselves. So it was, you kind of got a few different perspectives, and the classes themselves were split between Muslims and non-Muslims, and so it wasn't really like, yeah, it wasn't theology by any means.
Got it. That sounds really interesting. If you did get to like hear about things from a critical perspective, that I would definitely be interested in. Wow.
Yeah, especially in the discussions in class, it was definitely there were some interesting discussions and interesting motivations for people doing the major as well.
Yeah, I bet. And did they ever like teach Sam Harris or IDW content in this?
Actually, no, definitely not. But I did do an Islam in the media subject, and there was some Ayan Hirsi Ali content. So that is interesting. And thinking back now, it was the teacher was not very critical.
Oh, okay.
Which surprises me. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. And then we have Erin from my half of the world.
Yes. Hi.
How are you doing? I'm so glad that all three of us could find a time to talk. It's always very hard to schedule with people in Australia, New Zealand, Japan. So thank you guys for being available today.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. But yeah, Erin, tell me more about yourself. I think you've just recently become a patron, and we've chatted a bit, and yeah, sounds like we have a lot of things in common too.
Yeah, it's been really, really nice. I went to San Francisco when I was 18, so that was kind of my in lieu of college. I went to a big city and dove into what that would be like with very, very few family members. I had like a cousin that lived in the city. So my early 20s, all the way through my 30s were away from politics, with the exception of some anti-war protests. And my sister at the time, so she's a co-founder of Iraq Veterans Against the War.
Oh, okay.
Which has since transitioned. Now they're called About Face. And it's still veterans that are against war. Mm-hmm. She is not a member anymore, but that was a huge influence in just like the way that my politics were going to be as an adult. And really inspiring from both of us growing up in a town in Colorado where you just join the military. It's just kind of what people do, especially if they want to go to college. And so I almost joined the military. I was just disqualified for scoliosis. Otherwise, I would definitely have gone and done something. And I'm just so grateful for my crooked spine, honestly.
Wow.
So it was after that Sam Harris and Bill Maher and Jon Stewart, a lot of the television personalities that were really outspoken against the Iraq War, but also from an atheist perspective, that really spoke to me. And
Sam Harris wasn't, though, against it, if if I remember correctly. He was all about...
Oh, is that right? Gosh, that's funny. I was like... I just remember him in some debates at the time. Like, it was Christopher Hitchens was debating a lot, and my dad was the one to really turn on those debates, and that particular Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. And with my dad, it's kind of funny, given I think with him it was a real religious backlash once he started to see the way that that the religious right in the United States was going along with everything. And whatever religious background he had growing up, it just didn't jive anymore with his politics. And so ever since, he's been very, very anti-religion.
Oh.
And really it's been, and so lately,
So does your dad listen to that content, like of Sam Harris and Dawkins and stuff?
He doesn't really. I think he definitely was into Hitchens a lot and read his books and everything. It didn't really cross over into even Bill Maher. Anyone that was, I think just because he doesn't watch television, he's a real reader. So all of the stuff that he was getting was books, and he went down a lot of 9/11 as a conspiracy, wormholes and stuff. So I've definitely had to be aware of the things that I listen to when it comes to, if it comes from my dad. But lately, really, it was that, once Trump started to rise to power, it was clear that this was an important thing to be paying attention to again. And my life changed. I got older. I was a lot more in tune with this stuff just on a natural way.
Same, yeah.
And that's really when I kind of went through a really short-lived love affair with Bill Maher and his show, and just going from feeling like, yeah, there's all this rhetoric against Trump that I really love and that I can get behind and is funny. And, I think some of the things that he says is funny, and then that helped a lot, given, I'm a real child of The Daily Show. Like, I really grew up on it a lot. But then it like pretty instantly turned. I think that as soon as I started to recognize the maneuvers that he was pulling, and especially just his anti-millennial rhetoric just got to be so just blatant and silly. And like, there wasn't really a point ever or a solution offered. It was just like he was standing on his front porch with his cane, like yelling at teenagers.
That's exactly what he's turned into. Like, there's very little daylight between, what I see on Dennis Prager's timeline or Ben Shapiro's and Bill Maher's. And I used to be a big fan of his too, unfortunately. But now looking back, I can see that a lot of these guys had it in them, like, all along. You can see like evidence of it, like, in hindsight, but in the moment, I guess I was very easily convinced that they were acting in good faith. No pun intended.
Yeah, it felt like.
Did you watch his documentary? Is that even what I should be calling it? His movie Religulous, Bill Maher.
Yes. Yeah, that really spoke to me at the time, especially. I think I'm not sure when that movie came out.
Was it like early 2000s? Like 2006,
I want to say it was
2005, something like that? Or was it after that?
It's funny because I graduated high school in 2001.
It was 2008. It came out.
Okay.
Okay. So it was a while after that. Yeah, gosh, it's hard to piece my historical timeline from high school together because I was so rallying against like a very religious just culture.
So I can completely relate to that, and that I think like can leave you vulnerable to some very reactionary anti-religious types.
Yeah.
So
it was surprising to find. I think with Bill Maher, the biggest surprise for me was when I had heard about him having real woo, like when it comes to health science being really off. And then he had this guy, Charlie Sheen's doctor, who like injected his blood into his own arm.
Oh gosh.
It was just the craziest thing I could think of for Bill Maher to platform this person. And that really like opened my eyes to just, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. He's just a regular right-winger that happens to like weed and, and dislikes religion. So then after that, he was all platforming Milo, then Peterson. And Kate, did you watch the Religulous documentary when it came out?
Yeah.
Did you like it at the time?
I didn't watch it when it came out. I watched it some years later, probably when I was getting into Sam Harris and everything. And I actually did like it at the time. I remember watching that, and I just kind of went through all of the anti-religion documentaries, like that one, and what was that one about the Orthodox Jewish communities in New York? It was about it. Do you remember that one? Did either of you watch it?
The Netflix one?
Yeah, no, it wasn't Netflix. I watched it on YouTube, but I think it's on Netflix now. It was about that, something steps, or about that group that kind of helps Jewish people out of the Orthodox communities.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about.
I watched that one, and there must have been a few other ones, but yeah, I did go through all of them. And I can't even remember that clearly, but I remember liking it at the time.
Yeah, and I remember watching Bill Maher's movie and thinking even then that something about it bothered me, because the way that he treated Islam was very different from how he treated all the other religions. It was all like, oh, terrorists, danger, evil, and the other ones were like, oh, goofy clowns. Haha, so silly. Yeah, so that bothered me then. But
it really says a lot too today to see the things that are being downplayed by the same group of people today, which is similarly like white supremacy is not that big of a deal.
Oh yeah, like fucking hell. I mean,
it's not that bad. It's like
Sam Harris's classic sentence was what was
Fringe
it?
of the Fringe.
Fringe of the Fringe.
Fringe of the Fringe.
It's just like captured the presidency.
It's captured. No, the leftists have captured every single institution in the US.
Exactly.
Except the presidency.
And white supremacy.
And the presidency is inconsequential, so that doesn't count.
Right.
Exactly. Extremely fringe. But that must be interesting to observe as someone who has a PhD in Islamic studies, to just observe these guys' rhetoric and the sort of tricks that they have,
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because I'm honestly unsure whether they were always like this and whether it's my mindset has changed or whether they have gotten considerably worse. I think it's probably my mindset has definitely changed, but I think also, the social and political conditions that they're having these conversations in definitely matters as well.
Exactly. So a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, definitely a bit of both. But it is interesting because when I was at uni early on, I think I still, when I was getting into all of this new atheism stuff, I still preferred it when they criticized Christianity. I still thought it was more interesting and more amusing because I suppose, you could make a joke out of it a bit. But I still thought that it was fair that someone like Sam Harris at the time was focusing a lot more on Islam, particularly because when I started uni was when, or like a bit into when I started uni was when, ISIS was in its heyday. So it felt to me at the time like it was an important thing to focus on.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't super critical of that. But
the platform has been there for these guys. Like, obviously it was there for us when we came along and caught wind of these guys and were like turned on by them. And then
turned on is not a word I would use.
my sexy news daddy, my Jon Stewarts, and but the platforms were so different, and with social media, it really does feel like everything that it speeds up, you know, it really is like the human experience it feels like it gets put on this trajectory. It's just so fast. Mm-hmm. And the incentives for them became so clear so fast. It's like within days you can tell exactly how you need to there, and the hatred for women that comes from language like that when the go-to is in a moment of like deep emotion and anger on his part, when it comes out as like, I have a vagina.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, that's just a hatred for vaginas. Like, and I couldn't ever get past that as a woman. And so it's easy for me to have like one little thing to say to anyone in the family or, you know, anyone in the world, really, like, go listen to this one clip. But, you know, unless you're not a woman, because misogyny is so deep.
Yeah. Well, and also in the context of him laughing along with like other comedians talking about forcing women to perform oral sex on them, and just there's a lot. It's not just anti-vax stuff.
Yeah. And it just the way that it's invisible to men, it's really eye-opening. And I don't
That's right. You know, I must confess, look, this is a patron-only podcast, so not everyone will hear this, but I do enjoy. You can see where they stop, like which part of Dave Rubin's path they want to go up to this point in the Dave Rubin timeline, but they don't want to cross over.
The Dave Rubin model.
Exactly.
Yes.
So for me, it's very, I think, interesting and important to expose people that might slip under people's radars, whereas obvious extremists like Richard Spencer or whatever, I feel like anyone, and well, almost anyone, should be able to spot that and denounce it. And
you're just sitting there going, what? Did you really just say that?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But in the same way of in that also being kind of indicative of how male dominated this area is, even when he made that comment about you being crazy and it was just laughed off, I don't see a valid excuse for that. And when Chris came on to your to speak with you about that, and he did give an explanation, I just don't buy that. I just don't think that it would have. You could have said it in a way that didn't result in him just going, you know, over and over why he doesn't like you. You just, you can just say, well, okay, well, I don't agree with that, but let's move on. It's so there's so much weight to calling a woman crazy.
Yeah.
That I don't know how people don't understand the connotations of those words and can just let it go by like that.
It's just so obvious when you hear, honestly, it was when I heard you talk to Chris, Ina, that it was like the idea of a woman even being in this space.
Yeah.
It's like it hadn't even crossed my mind.
I don't know anyone in real life that anymore who's a fan of Sam Harris, but I would be so interested to have a real life conversation with someone who still listens to his stuff, because I wonder, he would have he would have hundreds of thousands of listeners. Well, he has like over how many?
Millions.
Yeah. So I wonder, there would be a small degree, there'd be some of them that are really into, like, mega fans who follow everything that he does. And then there would be some listeners who just kind of, oh yeah, he has good ideas on this topic or that topic. And I wonder what it would be like to have these discussions offline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm always tempted to invite on a Sam Harris fan because I think I could have a lot of fun with that. But then I also don't want to do this, manufacturing a contentious conversation for clicks kind of thing. If it happens organically, then it happens. But I do provide a lot of backing to the points that I'm making.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's where I think, that the gender as well comes into this again, because you don't really get given as many concessions as a lot of other people who are critical in this space.
Yeah, for sure.
And I hear that in the way that people, whenever you raise a criticism in your podcast or even online or whatever, people are straight into talking about the way you frame that criticism and the way that you use sarcasm or you were a little bit mean about it.
You weren't nice.
And that's all they focus on, when that is just what everyone in this space does. Everyone laughs about it because some of the things that these people say are just laughable and ridiculous, and it's very easy to pinpoint where they're wrong.
Yeah.
And they just use your snark, as I always say, as a way to discredit what you're saying. And I am completely convinced that this would never happen if you're a white man making these podcasts.
Yeah, probably not. In fact, I won't name who it is because this person. Oh, okay. So last summer, there was an article in Salon by Phil Torres called, I think it was titled, How New Atheists Merged with the Far Right.
Okay.
And to my surprise, there was a bunch of podcast bros whom I was quite friendly with up to that point, and I thought they totally agreed and got what was going on because they have in the past been critical of Harris, but they started to get super defensive about the term New Atheism, and they put out these extremely pedantic defenses. I mean, if you go back in my catalog into summer of last year, you'll find podcasts talking about this New Atheism merging with the far right stuff. But so these bros, they started to get very defensive and started lashing out in very, very unreasonable ways, completely blown out of proportion, because I mildly criticized some of the defensive takes that they put out. And so it got very, very out of hand, and there was ridiculous accusations being hurled that.
But the thing is, he doesn't have that power, but the power that he does have is a podcast where he can spread ideas to millions of people, and he chooses to use that platform to spread right and far right ideas. So I'm not interested in focusing on what Sam would do in a hypothetical, made up sense. It's more interesting to me and more relevant, obviously, what he actually does. And he's definitely not doing anything for the left. He doesn't care about the left.
He's doing the opposite.
His sympathies,
of caring, about the left.
Yeah.
He's hating on and demonizing the left constantly.
Yeah. That's all he cares about.
But even in the hypothetical, I thought it was interesting because it's so... Access this brand new Patreon exclusive series by becoming a patron today.